She thought she was building a life with him, one filled with laughter, dreams, and a future they'd shape together. But behind Simon's warm smile was a plan, a quiet, methodical erasure of who Christy was. Until one day, the woman he tried to control disappeared, leaving behind someone capable of murder. This is not just a story about love gone wrong. It's about psychological warfare behind closed doors, reproductive coercion, gaslighting, and betrayal so deep it shatters the soul. This is the story of Christy and the man she killed. This is Vic's True Crime Stories. Let's unravel the case that proves even the most ordinary lives can hide the darkest secrets. Christy was the kind of woman who knew where she was headed. Driven, self-made, and freshly promoted at her marketing firm, she wasn't the type to fall fast. She believed in logic, in hard work, and in keeping her emotions in check. That was until Simon walked into her life. She met him at a friend's birthday dinner, one of those rooftop evenings with dim lights, soft jazz, and too much red wine. He was sitting across the table, quiet at first, but his eyes never left her. By dessert, he was next to her. By the end of the night, he had her number and her attention. Simon was smooth in a way that didn't feel practiced. He listened, really listened. He remembered the name of her college professor, asked about her sister's art gallery, laughed at her dry jokes like they were the cleverest things he'd ever heard. Within days, he was texting her every morning with affirmations. Within weeks, he was sending flowers to her office. Not the cheap kind, either. These were full arrangements. Orchids, peonies, handwritten notes that read like poetry. Dates were extravagant. Dinners at places she'd only heard about in magazines. Weekend trips to wine country. A bracelet for her birthday that she didn't dare look up the price of. It was intoxicating. And more than that, it felt deserved. She'd worked so hard. She'd earned this kind of love. She told herself that, often. But it wasn't just the gifts. It was the way he made her feel chosen. Like she was the only person in the room worth looking at. Like he was lucky to have her. And so, when he suggested they move in together just 2 months after meeting, it didn't feel rushed. It felt right. He even helped her prepare for a major presentation at work, spent hours rehearsing it with her, gave tips on tone and posture. When she got the promotion, he was waiting outside her building with champagne. Christy told her friends he was her good luck charm. Still, there were moments, tiny ones. He'd raise an eyebrow when she wore a low-cut dress to work. He'd casually mention that her mother always seemed to stress her out. Maybe they should take some space. At first, it sounded like concern. Then, slowly like suggestion. Just small things. Do you think Nicole really has your best interest at heart? He once asked, after Christy came back from brunch with her best friend. She seems a little competitive with you. She laughed it off. Nicole was like a sister. They'd been through everything together. But the next time she made plans, Simon had already booked a surprise dinner. And the time after that, he wasn't feeling well and really needed her to stay home. She started canceling. He was emotional in a way that caught her off guard. If she came home late without texting, he'd withdraw for hours. If she disagreed with him, even gently, he'd take it as a personal attack. Once, after a minor argument over grocery shopping, he didn't speak to her for 2 full days. Then came the apology. Grand, tearful, promising. She forgave him. Every time, he told her he just cared so much. That she meant everything to him. That when he got upset, it was only because he couldn't imagine losing her. And maybe that was true. Maybe it wasn't. But it worked. She believed him. She wanted to believe him. He began organizing her schedule. "You're so busy," he'd say. "Let me help." Soon, he was texting her coworkers, replying to emails on her behalf, paying her phone bill, just to be helpful, just to make life easier. Christy started to feel dependent, not helpless, just relieved to let someone else take the reins. And if there was a cause to that comfort, an argument here, a guilt trip there, well, love wasn't perfect, was it? Her friends noticed she was quieter, more withdrawn. Nicole, especially, started pushing back. "He's not who you think he is," she said once. Christy defended him, fiercely, then Quietly, she stopped bringing him up in conversation. It was easier. At first, Christy believed it was love. The deep, consuming kind she had read about in novels. The kind that demanded everything. But soon, she'd realize it was something else entirely. Something that didn't just want her heart. It wanted all of her. At first, Christy thought the change would be good. Simon had always talked about how stressful her job was, how long the hours had become, how drained she looked after back-to-back meetings. So when he suggested she explore something less demanding, something that allowed them to have more time together, it didn't sound alarming. It sounded considerate. He even helped her rewrite her resume, found her listings online, practiced interview questions with her. And when she landed a flexible remote position with half the pressure and a little less pay, he congratulated her with a home-cooked meal and a weekend getaway. Christy believed she was entering a softer chapter of her life, one where she could breathe a little more. But slowly, the space she once moved freely in began to shrink. She stopped seeing her friends, not out of neglect. At first, she just didn't have the energy. Then came the guilt. If she went out without Simon, he'd sulk. If she invited friends over, he'd mysteriously develop a headache or some urgent task that required her attention. Eventually, the invitation stopped. Nicole had been the only one who didn't back down. She showed up once, unannounced, demanding they talk. Christy met her outside, whispering, glancing nervously back at the window where Simon stood, watching. They argued. Nicole begged her to see what was happening. Christy told her she didn't understand. And just like that, Nicole was gone, blocked, erased, without friends or a career that truly belonged to her. Christy's world began to revolve around Simon completely. He handled the finances, made decisions about the house, chose their groceries, paid her phone bill. She told herself it was teamwork, that this was what a real partnership looked like. And if she ever felt small or lonely, she reminded herself she was lucky. Simon loved her. He'd done so much for her. And then she got pregnant. She told him over dinner, holding the test in shaking hands. Her voice caught somewhere between panic and excitement. For a moment, his face went still. Then he leaned in, kissed her forehead, and said, "It's not the right time." No anger, just quiet disappointment, like a teacher correcting a student. By the end of the week, he'd scheduled the appointment, told her it would all be okay, that they were just waiting for the right moment, that they'd try again when things were more stable. It happened again a year later, and again, 8 times over 6 years. Christy found herself in that same cold room. Each time, the promises returned. How they'd travel first, how they'd buy a bigger place, how they'd build the perfect life to welcome a child into. She kept waiting for that moment. It never came. Simon always had a reason. Finances, stress, timing. And each time she questioned it, he turned the conversation on its head. "You're being impulsive," he'd say. "We agreed on this. You said you understood." And then, when she'd crumble, he'd hold her and whisper, "You know I want this too, just not like this." Christy started to question her own memory. Did she agree? Did she misunderstand? Was she pushing too hard? The confusion became constant. She'd wake up in the middle of the night, unsure of whether they'd talked about something or if it had only been in her head. He'd deny conversations she was certain they'd had, laugh off her questions. "You get worked up so easily," he'd say. "You twist things around." She stopped trusting her own thoughts. Her feelings became suspicious to her. If she cried, he called her dramatic. If she expressed frustration, he told her she was unstable. "You should be grateful," he'd whisper. "No one else would put up with this." Sometimes, she stared at herself in the mirror and couldn't recognize a woman looking back. She used to be loud, confident. She used to fill a room. Now, she treaded carefully in her own home, second-guessed every word before she spoke, smiled too quickly, apologized too often. The silence between them grew thicker with each passing year, and still, she stayed. Because she was holding on to the version of Simon she first met. The man who sent flowers. The man who said she was extraordinary. The man who promised forever. But forever was starting to feel like a sentence. And nothing, absolutely nothing, could prepare Christy for what came next. A secret so deeply hidden, it would pull the last thread loose. The final betrayal. The moment that would tip everything over the edge and change her life permanently. It happened on a quiet afternoon. Nothing remarkable about the day, not until Christy reached for Simon's phone. He left it charging on the kitchen counter, face down as always, a habit she'd never questioned. Until that moment, she hadn't meant to look. Maybe curiosity had been building for weeks. Maybe her instincts had sharpened over time. Or maybe it was just one of those small moments that changes everything. The screen lit up and there it was, a message. Simple, unassuming, but the name lit a fire in her chest. Nicole. It was a photo, a blurry ultrasound, followed by the words, "Told you I'd wait. Can't believe it's real." Christy stared at the screen, reading it again, and again. Her hands didn't shake. Her breath didn't catch. She just stood there, frozen in the kind of silence that can swallow a person whole. Nicole, her best friend, the only one who had tried to warn her, the one person she still dreamed about confronting, apologizing to, maybe even reconciling with one day. They'd been seeing each other for a year, and now Nicole was pregnant. She sat down slowly, phone still in hand. The world around her didn't feel real. It was too quiet, too still, like time had stopped to let her suffer in slow motion. She didn't cry. Not then. Her eyes stayed wide open, locked on the last message. "I want us to tell her soon." Later that evening, she asked Simon, plainly, quietly, if he loved her. He didn't answer right away. He stared at her like he was measuring how much she already knew. Then he sighed, like a man tired of pretending. "I never saw you as a mother," he said. The words didn't feel sharp. They felt cold, clinical, like something he'd rehearsed in his head and finally decided to release. "She makes sense," he continued. "You and I, we just never got there. I was waiting for the right moment to tell you." Once things settled down, there was no apology, no shame, only the sound of someone rearranging their life without you in it. And that was it. Everything inside Christy seemed to crack. Slowly. Then suddenly, she began to move through her days like someone wading through wet concrete. Slow, heavy, numb. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't scream, even when she wanted to. She told herself it would pass. That eventually, the pain would lessen. That maybe she could still walk away and start over. But each day bled into the next, and the weight never lifted. Until one night, during a fight that started like all the others and then kept going long after it should have ended, something inside her gave out. No one will ever know the exact words spoken. No one knows how it escalated, or how many times she begged him to leave, or how loud she cried, or how quiet he must have gotten when he realized she wasn't breaking anymore. She was unraveling. The neighbors reported hearing a crash, then silence, then the sound of sirens in the early hours of morning. Simon was found dead, stabbed multiple times in their apartment. There was no sign of forced entry, no other suspect, no confusion about who had done it. Only one question remained. Was it revenge planned in the darkest corners of Christy's mind? Or was it the final, desperate act of a woman who had been worn down to nothing? She sits now in a courtroom, quiet. No outbursts, no tears. The world may think they know her story. But the truth has layers no one ever bothered to see. And the real question isn't just whether Christy killed Simon. It's what had died inside her long before that night ever began. She didn't try to run. There was no last attempt at escape, no dramatic disappearance, no note left on the counter. Christy walked into the police station the next morning with her head held still and quiet. No emotion on her face, not because she didn't feel anything, but because she felt everything, and there was nothing left to do but tell the truth. The trial was long. Every detail of their relationship was laid bare in court. Each moment that had chipped away at her piece by piece. The messages, the appointments, the money she never controlled, the friend she lost, the promises he made and unraveled with expert precision. Witnesses spoke. Records were shown. and a story unfolded that many found too complex to digest neatly. Some jurors stared at Christie like she was a stranger they couldn't figure out, a woman capable of murder. They saw the photos, heard the forensic reports. They called her calm, calculated, dangerous. But others saw something else. They looked closer and found a woman who had once been bright, hopeful, soft, a woman who, over time, had been silenced so gradually that by the time she screamed, no one was left to hear it. In the end, the courtroom didn't agree. The jury split down the middle, half certain she had planned it, the other half sure she had finally broken. She was sentenced to 18 years in prison. No parole, no appeals, just time. Time she would serve while the world went on, never fully knowing who Christie had once been or what it had taken for her to survive that long. People talk about abuse like it has to be loud. They expect bruises. They expect yelling, slamming doors, threats shouted in anger. But the kind Christie endured was quieter. It wore a smile. It kissed her on the forehead. It said things like, "I only want what's best for you." And it rewired her mind day by day until she couldn't tell the difference between being loved and being owned. That's the part people miss. Control doesn't always come with raised voices. Sometimes it sounds like concern. Sometimes it looks like love. And by the time you realize what it really is, you're too deep to climb out without bleeding. Christie's story is more than a crime. It's a warning, a line drawn in the sand between affection and domination, and a reminder that what looks like devotion on the surface can sometimes be a slow, deliberate erasure of who you are. If you've seen signs like these in your own life, or in the life of someone you care about, don't wait. Don't tell yourself it's nothing. Don't let silence buy more time. Speak. Reach out. Ask the question no one else dares to ask. And if you found this story compelling, if it made you think, feel, question even for a moment, subscribe to Vic's True Crime Stories. Because the human mind has corners we rarely look into. But once you do, you never see things the same way again.